Sovremenny DDG Project 956, the Buzzard-class. Ship brief. Let's go. All right, so something that is not widely known is this Sovremenny is actually a derivative of a cruiser called the Cresta II. Now, it's important to understand that the hull size is not what's important here. What is important is, do you understand the Sovremenny is a destroyer, not a cruiser, even though it's derived from a cruiser hull. And what happened was, in about 1970, and some sources go all the way back to 1967, Russia realized that, hey, its older, surface warships post-World War II just were not going to cut it in the modern missile age. So they needed to come up with a surface combatant that was going to be capable of high speeds, long range, and bring a surface combat capability to the fight in the 1970s and going forward. And so this is going to be the first modern DDG in the then Soviet Navy. And a couple of these still exist in the Chinese Navy, but we'll get to that. So the focus of this ship is surface combat, although it is capable of ASW and air combat as well, but its primary focus is as a surface combatant, specifically to support an amphibious landing. Now, this will not carry Marines and put troops on shore, but it will support those troops with surface-to-surface cannon and missile fire. In 1971, the Sovremenny Design Bureau begins development in 1971. And the idea is to pair this with the upcoming Hangzhou-class. The Hangzhou-class will be focused on anti-submarine warfare, and this will accompany it to protect the Hangzhou as it does its mission. These two ships working together, the Sovremenny and the Hangzhou, is a perfect pairing to protect each other and project force out into the oceans. All right, so where are these built? These were built in St. Petersburg, Russia. Originally, they were going to build 21, and then they got reduced to 17, and then I don't think they even got that many out. So the total number is not that important. Just know that it's less than 20. The company that owns the shipyard now is called the Joint Stock Company. It's one of 3 shipyards. So even though only 7,300 workers are at this shipyard, which is a lot, it's one of 3 shipyards. So there's a lot more people that work in this area than just those many people. In the Soviet era days, this was known as Shipyard 190. So you may see some references to that if you're doing your own homework. Today, it is called the Northern Shipyard. And it builds both civilian ships like, large ferries, fishing vessels, and then it also is capable of building warships as well. It does both. So something that immediately came up in the design phase, this is important to understand, that the Russians understood this and went forward with this program anyway, was that the steam turbines were very sensitive to the quality of feed water being used to turn into steam. It had to be pure water. Any residue, any impurities in the water would leave a film, if you will, and that would build up and eventually block pipes over many years if they didn't have pure water in the boilers. And that would become a real problem because the Russians in operation apparently didn't care. They just went ahead and used, the water that they could make on board to fill the feed water tanks. And that water wasn't always pure. Sometimes it had salt in it because they were at sea. And that salt would eventually build up and block and essentially destroy the boilers. And so it had a very short lifespan. These main engines deep inside the bowels of the ship had a very short lifespan because of the way that it was operated. And they didn't use the cleanest water that they were supposed to in actual operation. And that was the Achilles heel. All right, so the Sovremenny-class, like I said, is the first modern destroyer of the Soviet era. It was laid in 1976, launched in 78. This is Hull 1, and was commissioned in December 1980, where it went right into sea trials. And during the 1980s, before they could gum up the works, it did participate in a number of naval exercises. They had annual naval exercises called Ocean 83, 84, 85, and it was, involved in all of those. But then the main engines began failing because basically this feed water was building up residue in the main engines, and They had to pull in for repairs to clean them out. Sometimes, just replace a lot of the parts in the main engines, keeping this ship in port for a large part of its life. So it wasn't always paired with the Utiloi as much as they wanted it to be. Utiloi had a different set of engines that was not as problematic. So Hull 1 was eventually decommissioned in 1998, the Sovremenny. So what was the Sovremenny? Well, it was a 156-meter long warship, 17-meter beam, that's the width, displaced about 7,900 tons. This number goes all over the place, as high as 8,400, which is ridiculous. There was a couple of displacements that had it around 6,400. I think that was without weapons. So whenever you get the crew and the food and the fuel and the weapons on board, it's displacing about 7,900 tons. The GTZA 674 turbo pressurized steam turbines, these are the ones that required the pure feed water. They would take an hour and a half to start. And this is in the era of when the American and NATO navies were using the GM or the GE LM 2500, basically a turbine engine that was modified from aircraft use to a marine use that could start up in about 12 to 20 minutes. So there was a big disadvantage here in startup time. So not only was it maintenance intensive and broke a lot and was unreliable, it also took a long time to start compared to same era NATO ships. An hour and a half to get started and go to sea. She had 2 shafts, 5 blades, 32 knots. The crew was about 320. Obviously, this number varies a lot with people rotating in and out, but approximately 320. That includes the officers. She does have mine laying capability. She's got 2 mine laying tracks that they can roll mines right off the back, just like a World War II destroyer. So she does have that. She can carry 40 mines on board. And she has the Bullhorn active passive hull sonar that I can't talk about. Just know it's not very good. As far as weapons go, though, she had a ton of weapons, as did a lot of, Russian/Soviet ships in the day. They were really coming out in this era of the 70s and 80s. This is the highlight of the modern warship for the Soviets. This is when they're building the Slavas. They're going to start building the Utilois. Sovremenys are with them. They're going to be building the Kirovs. The next 2 decades, the 70s and 80s, are the heyday of the Soviet fleet. Not just in submarines that they continued to make. They had over 100 of, maybe even over 200 if you count all the diesel boats. Submarines. They had a huge submarine fleet. But the surface fleet, post 1970, had a lot of capability. Really, really scary. This was getting the attention of people in NATO, too. They're like, the Russians are building really good warships now for this era, 1970s, 1980s. Okay, 2 twin 130 millimeter DP guns. The conversion on this is basically a 5-inch, just a little bit bigger than a 5-inch gun. But these are twin barrels, so they can shoot from each turret literally twice as fast because they have 2 of them. And then they put 2 turrets, one forward, one aft. So it can spit a lot of shells. Again, designed for surface combat, shore bombardment. It can get things done. It can put warheads on foreheads. She has 4 close-in weapon systems for point defense because they knew this ship would be used in the missile age, so they wanted a good point defense. They also had 4 quad Zuber or SSN-22 Sunburn missiles, and these things were terrifying. This is a supersonic cruise missile in the 1980s. Yeah, I mean, if this thing's coming your way, if you have a Sunburn coming at you, you better get it while it's in flight. Don't wait for your point defense to take this thing out. You want to shoot this thing as far away as possible. She also had 2 single rail Uragan, which is the SAN-7 Gadfly 44 missiles. Now, the name Gadfly is a little confusing because the SA-11, the Army version of the same missile, is also called the Gadfly because it's the same missile. But because it's on a ship, it's the SAN, which is the naval variant, and then they made it the 7 instead of 11. So don't get it confused. Same missile as the SA-11 that's on the mobile launcher, also called the Buk, I believe. And they had 44 of those missiles on board, so they could, stay in the fight. She had 2 twin 53-centimeter torpedo tubes. You can see them there right under the smokestack right there. They're on the waist, and they can just basically point them outboards and shoot, a 53-centimeter torpedo. It's not wire guided or anything. It's fire and just let it go. And if it finds a target, it's going to kill it. And she does have 2 RBU-1000 ASW rockets on board. We'll go over all these in detail, beginning with the Sunburn missile. Speed is 2.2 Mach, really, really fast. Carries a 320 kilogram warhead, so pretty heavy, nuclear capable. Range of the original version, and there's going to be 2 versions of this missile, is 48 miles, 48 nautical miles. Might even be 3 versions of the missile now that I think about it. It's not exactly sea skimming by today's standards, but it is a cruise missile for sure. It goes about 20 meters above the water. So it's not exactly sea skimming like the Harpoon was in the same era. So 20 meters above the water. It is active radar homing. That's how it homes in on your ship. And the 3M80E upgrade increased the range to about 65 nautical miles. The Chinese will get a hold of this missile at the end of our brief here and do another modification. So that you could count that as a third one if you want. All right, let's talk about the SAN-7 Gadfly. This is the naval version of the SA-11 Buk, like I said. It's a medium range, semi-active homing, surface-to-air missile. Range is about 30 kilometers. And they have 2 single rail launchers, 1 forward and 1 aft. The AK-130 dual-purpose cannons. They have, again, 1 forward, 1 aft, double-barreled. This one had reliability problems. These would eventually get worked out a little bit over time, but during the time that this ship was active, it had reload issues. It would jam, it would cease functioning. It was a little bit ahead of its time. It was a very ambitious, turret, and it suffered from mechanical problems because of that. So not only does the ship have main engine problems, it also had main armament problems as well. But it can shoot about 35 shells per minute using both barrels. The range is about 15 nautical miles ballistic, and each one has a 180 round magazine. And it is an unmanned turret with an autoloader, and that was really the part of the Achilles heel was that autoloading. Once that jammed, you had to get a sailor out there to try and fix it. The RBU-1000s, these are the rocket bomb units that are used for anti-submarine warfare, essentially depth charges that are launched out with rocket motors to a range of 1,000 meters, where the bombs then descend and they explode on contact. And some of the later warheads would have a magnetic detonator. So if they detected a submarine nearby, they didn't have to actually physically hit it, which would be kind of lucky. If it got in the vicinity, it would explode. They could also set them to explode at certain depths, just like an old depth charge. So lots of different ways to use this weapon. This weapon is still used today on modern ships, other ships as well. And they can, the primary purpose besides anti-submarine warfare is anti-swimmer warfare. So they can shoot these in the direction of where they believe some swimmers are and completely annihilate them. They don't even have to get close. So that's kind of a secondary use that you may see today. But back in the day, anti-submarine warfare was its primary function. There you can see they've got 1 port and 1 starboard. The top red arrow is pointing to where it is on the other side of that helideck. You can't see it, but that's where it's located. All right, let's talk about the AK-630 point defense system. You guys should be very familiar with this by now if you follow this channel. They have 4 of these, 2 port, 2 starboard. And they have the base tilt radar, marked them in blue. Those are the fire control radars that aim the guns. The guns can be aimed manually, by the way, optically guided, from inside the control center. But their normal operation is to have this special base tilt fire control radar aim the weapon at incoming and low-flying aircraft, including cruise missiles, anything that's within a couple miles, and take it out. Very high rate of fire. The Ka-27 helicopter. This is a very advanced helicopter. The one today is the, I believe, a Ka-27M. There's all sorts of variants of this helicopter, but back in the day, it was just Ka-27. And she was a maritime, modernized, ASW platform, could go out and carry sonar buoys. It had a surface search radar, so it could provide fire control information for targets over the horizon that the ship radar couldn't see. So this was basically a force multiplier. It took the capability of the ship and it extended it over the horizon. Very good stuff. Because remember, those cruise missiles could go 65 nautical miles, and with the upgrade, and hit targets that this helicopter could see. So data link was very important to the operation of the ship. She also has a transport role, just like other helicopters. They can take on supplies and move supplies around. She has a phased radar. In later variants, obviously in 1960s and 80s, 70s and 80s, they didn't have the phased radar yet on board. But like I said, there's lots of variants of the K-27 that get better and better over time. And so she also has the magnetic anomaly detector that's used for detecting submarines. As they fly nearby, they'll get a spike on the sensor, and then they can mark it with smoke, and then they just drop weapons on the smoke. She also has ESM and data link capabilities. Very important part, often overlooked, and that's why I like to point it out here. That helicopters, extremely important in naval warfare, even today. Also, if you look at the top picture, something that isn't immediately apparent is this ship does have a telescoping hangar that I could not find any photos of. But you see the big barn doors that are just forward of the helicopter there? Yeah, they're kind of propped open a little bit, and they open up all the way like a clamshell. And inside that is a telescoping cover that they can pull out and protect the helicopter from the elements. So they don't have to leave the helicopter exposed to rain and salt and all the other things that tend to gum up mechanisms and machines at sea. So there is a hangar. It's currently stowed, and they can telescope it, pull it out over the helicopter if they want to. All right, Project 956 Alpha. This is the Sovremenny upgrade that we were alluding to. This begins in 1992, so just after the collapse of the Soviet Union, which probably is the reason why they only built 3 of these. And what they did was they upgraded the Sunburn missile to that 65 nautical mile range from its original variant and put it on it. They also added 2 12.7 millimeter guns there on the bow. You can see them, but then they removed them. So they didn't keep them there. Maybe they thought they were useless. I'm not sure. Couldn't find the reason why they didn't keep them there. I couldn't find the reason why they put them on there in the first place, but that's what they did. And they called it the 956 Alpha. Just know those guns that are marked did not stay on there long. And they also had the Project 956M modernized. And there was only one of these in 1997 that began construction. Sadly, it did not finish. But the big thing about this modernization was they were going to put in VLS to shoot the P-800 Onyx missile launcher. And the P-8 Onyx is a very capable missile by today's standards, but they were going to put it on the ship in 1997. Sadly, they suspended it, construction, probably due to lack of money. That's what we think. Or they couldn't get it to work. It could have been that too. But China came in with the paychecks, with the checkbook rather, and said that, hey, they want to buy an export version of the Sovremenny. So they built 2 956Es, which were essentially the original ships, and sold it to them. But then they modernized 2 more and sold 2 more to the Chinese a few years later. This is in the 2000s. And so the China has 4 of these Sovremenys, and the China are currently making their own changes to them. These 4 are still in service, by the way. China still uses these. And here they are. So here's the modernized export Project 956. They removed the AK-130 DP cannons. Those are the point defense cannons. And they replaced them with the Castans, or the Chinese version of Castans, which is the... it's got twin 6-barrel rotary guns. It also has some missiles on it, short-range surface-to-air missiles for point defense. A lot better point defense system, basically, than the original AK-630. It can put a lot of defensive fire out around this ship when incoming cruise missiles are coming, especially slower subsonic missiles like Harpoon and Exocet. Those missiles would be easy targets for this upgraded close-in weapon system. The new Chinese Sunburn missile is believed to have a range of 120 nautical miles. They're in those tubes there that you see next to the bridge, just behind the forward SAM launcher. That number is not verified, so I leave a little question mark by it. We don't know a lot about what the Chinese have done to the Sunburn, other than that they did modify it. So we assume that they would increase the capability. And one of the big things would be range. They would want to get more range out of it. They also have a midlife upgrade. They added a VLS, a 32-cell VLS in 4 8-cell pods, if you will. And so they can shoot VLS. And the big thing is they took off the aft dual purpose cannon. If you look, there's no cannon back there. So they took that away. And they also changed the sonar. We believe, and this is unconfirmed, that they purchased a variant, or they purchased the horse jaw sonar, which is the modern, Russian sonar even today, very capable sonar, and put it on this ship. In order for them to do that, they would have to somehow miniaturize a few things and details that we won't go into. But we believe that the Chinese variant of the Sovremenny-class does use a Chinese copy of horse-jaw sonar. Some other variations to it are they added a satellite communication antenna to the back of the ship, right over where they stow the hangar right there. And here's a really good shot of the aft end of one of the Chinese ships. And it has the gun's been removed there. I was just looking at the forward end, and it looks like they put the launchers. Oh, no, okay, it's still the same launchers there. I couldn't see the bottom pair, but sure enough. So there you have in the center of the three ships, the middle one, you can see it. That one does have the aft turret still, so that's not modified. That's one of the original Sovremenny classes. Remember, they bought two of the original ones, and they have two that they modernized themselves and took the aft turret off on that and added VLS. All right, so yeah, my final thoughts on the Sovremenny, man. This is a very capable ship, especially for the time, but it was just hamstrung by two major problems. The first one was they didn't operate the engines with the care and love and tenderness that they needed to keep them running reliably. They were not professional in terms of operation, keeping that feed water very pure and very clean. Sediment got into the engines from day one, it seems, and they had nothing but problems with the engines. The Russians, the Soviets did. They were very casual in their operation, and that caused reliability problems. It's just unacceptable, really, but that's how they operate their ships. They're very lackadaisical, it seems, in the 80s and 90s, operating these ships. And so that caused this class of ship to be in port often. And we know that the AK-130 weapons in the 80s and 90s suffered from mechanical issues. Those weapons got better over time, but in the early days, they were unreliable guns. But they had four of them, so there was a chance, 4 barrels anyway, 2 turrets, 4 barrels. There was a chance they were going to get some shots downrange before one of them jammed. But those were the two major problems with this ship. But when it was paired with the Utiloy, those two ships working together were very capable. That Utiloy will snap up your submarine, and the Sovremenny will shoot down your airplanes and destroy your surface ships with long-range missile fire and cannon fire, protecting the Utiloy while it does its job. It was a great idea, and they executed it well in terms of design and strategy and tactics. All that was great. But the operation, and I blame the crews and the leadership for this, honestly, of not maintaining those engines with the way that they knew they were supposed to, and the ship broke down a lot. The Sovremenny did not go to sea very often compared to, say, the Utiloy class, that, even though that was built later on, was much more active than the Sovremenny was.